All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk. Of course, this is the show where we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. C Wells coming at you. And we are back with another one of our 2023 season recaps. Today it's time to talk those big bad Braves, the Alcorn State Braves. Came up just short of a West Division championship. And if you know Alcorn like I do, coming up short is not a good thing for them. They had a chance, but couldn't seal the deal. Um, so they missed out. So we're gonna talk about how the season went, and just talk about the Braves in 2023. And actually, all things considered, it was a rocky start, but it got better toward the middle, and a misstep at the end cost them. But we'll talk about all of that. But before we do, make sure you hit those socials: Facebook is Swag Talk, Instagram Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76. You can check out the socials. Um, Before I drop any of these recaps, I'm gonna announce it the day before. So that's how you can keep tabs with it by following the socials. I don't have a set schedule for these, so I'm gonna announce when I'm gonna drop one the day before I do it. So that way, keep it locked with the socials so you can get that. Also, hit that subscribe button. We are making our way up to 1,200 subs, so y'all make sure y'all keep hitting that subscribe button. Hit the like button for sure. Comment your thoughts on the Braves on their 2023 season, and hit that join button to become a member. We got some great perks that we're working on. We're gonna have some members only videos, so if you want to catch those, definitely hit that join button. Starting the beginning of next year, we're gonna be giving out a couple free memberships, so y'all keep it locked for that. Also, you have access to our members only group chat, which can be pretty good, and you also be able to have early access to some videos by becoming a member. So you got two different tiers. You can see which one works for you, and hit that join button. Or if you don't want to do that, you want to support the show, you get the super thanks um, with a comment, or you can hit the Cash App $ Swag Talk to donate whatever you like. So anything would be appreciated. And now let's talk Alcorn State. The Braves finished this season at 7-4, 6-2 in conference. They finished tied for the West Division lead. They lost that division lead by a tiebreaker with Prairie View due to the Panthers defeating them earlier in the season. When I did my prediction for the season, I had the Braves finishing at 8-3, winning the West with a 6-2 record, and I had them winning SWAC championship game. So I came up short on that, but the Braves, I was only off by one non-conference game. I had them winning against Stephen F. Austin and McNeese. They only won one of the two. So that's the difference between my 8-3 and they 7-4. I don't think I had the conference games picked win and lost the way that I thought they would finish, but still same record. I did have them winning the West and winning the SWAC, so came up short there. But this was a pretty solid season. Got off to a rocky start. They lost to Southern Miss by a score of 44-10 to open up the season. They lost to Stephen F. Austin 38-10. Both those games were road games, so they started off the season at 0-2. Were able to come home and beat McNeese by a score of 17-3. They would lose to Prairie View on a last second field goal, 23-20. That opened up SWAC play. The very next week, they would beat Alabama State by a score of 23-20. So two games back to back, same score, one win, one loss. So they're sitting at 1-1 in conference. They had a comeback victory over Grambling at home, 25-24. They would go beat Pine Bluff 31-7. They would beat Valley 24-3, and they would beat Southern 44-21. And at that point, they were sitting pretty solid with only one conference loss. They were basically tied. They were basically kind of in the lead for the division, heading into a Sunday game at Texas Southern. TSU basically ambushed the Braves and beat them by a score of 44-10. I don't know if Alcorn just came out flat because it was Sunday, or came out flat coming off of that physical, emotional game against Southern, but they dropped that game, and then they would close out their regular season with a 28-24 victory over Jackson State. That was a game they took a 14-0 lead. Game got tied. They took another lead. Game got tied. Then they were able to score the final score to win by 4. The Braves, like I said, they finished 7-4, 6-2 in conference, tied for the division lead. Lost to do the tiebreaker. They finished the season with a 1-game streak, which I don't like to call that a winning streak, but they won their last game. They were 4-1 at home, 3-3 in conference, and did not play any neutral site games. Like I said, they were 1-2 in the non-conference. Both two of those two losses were not close at all. They were combined 78-24. So just a rough start for this team offensively. Couldn't really get it going. The running game wasn't there quite frankly, and the passing game was struggling mightily early. It wasn't until probably mid-season before the passing attack got going. The running game uh, never really took off like it did last season. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it never really took off like it did the previous season. The passing attack actually was a bit better. Was better than last season, so that's kind of where the team flipped at. Just to take a look at how their 2022 numbers look and we compare those to this past season's numbers. They finished ninth in the league in 2022 in scoring offense at 20.7 points per game. They finished sixth in scoring defense at 24.9 points per game. Total offense, they finished eighth at 342.5 yards per game. Total defense, they were fifth at 325 yards per game. They were fourth in rushing offense at 175 yards per game, fifth in rushing defense at 135 yards per game, eighth in passing offense at 167 yards per game. They were sixth in passing defense at 193 yards per game. They finished eighth in sacks allowed with 31. They were third in sacks by their defense at 39. They were 10th in interceptions with 8. They were 7th in third down conversion rate at 35.5. Third down defense, they were 5th at 36%. Fourth down offense, they were 4th at 50%. And fourth down defense, they were 10th at 44%. So as you can see, this team was kind of a middle of the pack team last season. The running game was really their strong suit. The defense had a great pass rush last season. They really harassed quarterbacks. Their numbers defensively were kind of in the middle in everything, but they were a very dangerous defense. Offensively, their numbers kind of were up and down and kind of skewed lower toward the end of the season. The 2022 season when Aaron Allen went down with an injury, quarterback play after that wasn't really great. Coming into the 2023 season, Allen was really slated by most people to not be the starting quarterback, but he took that job and he ran with it. The offense this season finished 7th in scoring offense at 22.4 points per game, so up a little bit more than 1 point from last season. Defensively, they shaved off over 2 points per game on their scoring average, finishing 4th at 22.5 points per game. They were 6th in total offense at 349 yards per game, so they increased their points per game by about 6.5. They were 5th in total defense at 339 yards per game. That number actually went up, but their ranking stayed the same. They were 6th in rushing offense at 140 yards per game, so that number dropped by about 35 yards. They were 4th in rushing defense at 140 yards per game. That number went up by about 5 yards per game. They were 6th in passing offense at 208 yards per game. That number increased by quite a bit. Now, if you just take the conference numbers, their numbers actually were even better in the passing game this season, as they were a team who really threw the ball extremely well this past season. I think they really became almost more of a passing offense this past season. That's not to say they couldn't run it, but they were a team who kind of threw the ball a lot better this season than last season. And if you kind of look at the conference only numbers, they averaged over 251 yards per game through the air. So that number really jumped up. Like I said, those overall numbers are skewed by FBS game and then a blowout loss to Stephen F. Austin. And then against McNeese, the offense wasn't that great. So those numbers kind of brought down the numbers. But looking at conference numbers, the passing game really exploded. once they got into conference play. Passing defense, they were sixth in the league at 198 yards per game. That number went up by about 5 yards. They were fourth in sacks allowed at 17, so they shaved off 14 sacks from last season to this season. The offensive line played a whole lot better, protecting the quarterback, and they were second in sacks by their defense with 30. Their number was down by 9, but everybody's sacks this season, as everybody's defensive numbers when it comes to sacks were down this season from last season. So they actually, even though their numbers were lower, they really finished with a higher ranking. So still a great number. 30 sacks is still a good number for your defense. They were 15th. They had 15 interceptions, which was good for third in the league. They really did a great job forcing turnovers. This was a very, very aggressive defense when it comes to forcing turnovers. They really made it tough for you to move the ball. They also forced they also recovered 8 fumbles, so that gave them 23 turnovers on the season. They don't really have a turnover margin ranking in the league, but they had 24 takeaways and they had 12 turnovers, so they were plus 11. That's a great number, and that's a good key to finish in the top portion of the conference. When you take care of the football, good things happen for you. And when you take it away and you don't give it away, it gives your offense a chance to hit a lot of big plays. You end up with some short fields, and your numbers get better. They finished sixth in third down conversion rate at 36%, so that was slightly up by about 1%. They were fifth in third down defense at 34%. That number dropped by about 1.1%. So still, that was a great, that's still great to allow teams to convert less than 35% on third downs. Their fourth down conversion rate went up to 61.5% from 50%, and they were third in the league instead of fourth the previous season. Their fourth down defense remained at 10th. This season, they were at 66% allowed on fourth downs, and they were 44% allowed on fourth downs in the 2022 season. So as you can see, the numbers aren't really that much of a difference from this season to last season. Their rankings didn't really jump a lot. Probably the biggest jump they had was if you look at their passing numbers in conference play alone. So this team was pretty consistent this season. Like I said, they had a rough start to the season, but they kind of got back on track. They were 27 to 33 in the red zone. They had 16 touchdowns. The opponents 29 to 35 in the red zone. They had 20 touchdowns. They were penalized for 60 yards per game. They had 72 penalties for 663 yards. The opponents had 63 yards per game in penalties. They had 81 penalties for 695 yards. The average time of possession was 29 minutes and 44 seconds. The opponents 29 minutes and 10 seconds. So they did a decent job controlling the ball. Like I said, that running game not being as great as it was in the previous season kind of skews those numbers a little bit. But they averaged 4.4 yards per carry on the season with 12 touchdowns. Offensively, they threw 15 touchdowns and had 8 interceptions. Defensively, they allowed 14 touchdowns with those 15 interceptions. And the opponents ran for 4.2 yards per carry, and they had 14 touchdowns. Braves, 30, finished the season with 30 total touchdowns. The opponents, 30 total touchdowns. And the numbers are 1 point different. They allowed 1 point more total over the season than they scored. They allowed 247 points to their 246. Looking at the individual numbers, Jarvion Howard, his numbers were down from last season. A lot of people thought he could be a 2,000-yard back, but a lot of things just really kind of went against him this season. He had the attempts. If you look at every game, he had double-digit attempts except for the Bama State game when he had 5. He just really couldn't get going on the ground. He only had 200-yard games this season, one against Pine Bluff and one against Southern. 161 yards was his top numbers this season. 128 was the second. He had 2 touchdowns, which was his season high against McNeese. So when you look at his numbers, like I said, he was a guy who who had a really great last season. He had a breakout year last season. Um, just didn't meet those numbers, but still was a very solid back for this offense. Was a guy who can kind of make some things happen for them. Just couldn't really get it going the way you would like him to this season. Last season he ran for almost 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. This season, 773 yards and 7 touchdowns. So numbers were down. His per carry average was still good at 5.1, which is the same as last season. So it's not that he had a horrible season. His numbers just weren't as great as they were. I mean, running for over 1,000 yards on any team is a great season. So sometimes you don't meet those marks, especially when you come in with high expectations for your season. But he still had a solid season. Um, Jacorian Sewell was their second leading rusher with 198 yards and 1 touchdown. Nico Duffy had 171 yards and 1 touchdown on the season. And Tyler Macon, who had a great start on the ground this season from the quarterback position, ran for 163 yards and 1 touchdown. He averaged 9.6 yards per carry. So he was more than able to break them when he ran them. His problem was in the passing game where he was only 2 of 13 on the season with 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Aaron Allen, great season this season, 194 of 304, 63% passing, 2,265 yards and 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Really great season for him. The passing game really took off. Um, Montario Hunt, 37 catches, 633 yards, averaged 17 yards per catch with 4 touchdowns. Malik Rogers, 28 catches, 462 yards. He averaged 16 and a half yards per catch with 3 touchdowns. Tavarius Griffin, tight end, 25 catches, 317 yards. He averaged over 12 yards per catch. He had 4 touchdowns. Tavarius Adams, 17 catches, 210 yards. Akeem McNair, 22 catches, 201 yards and a touchdown. Jarian Howard had 29 catches out of the backfield for 185 yards, no touchdowns. So as you can see, they had 5 guys with over 20 catches. They really spread the ball around. Adams was just short of that with 17. So they had 6 guys with over 15 catches. That's really spreading the ball around. All those guys had over 100 yards on the season. And everybody but Adams and Howard caught a touchdown. So their numbers were really good. And then, you still had 3 other guys who caught touchdowns who didn't really catch a lot of passes. Nico Duffy actually caught 15 passes as well. So he almost had 100 yards, 15 for 94. So that's another guy who caught over 15 passes. So they really spread the ball around. Allen didn't make a lot of mistakes this season. He had a stretch last season in the middle of the season where he threw, I think it was like 4 interceptions in that stretch. Didn't really have that happen this year. Had a few mistakes, but still the offense was a really great passing offense. A lot of big plays were to be had. And that's really the reason why they won a lot of the games they won. Terrence Ellis led the defense with 99 tackles. Malachi Bailey led the defense with 15 and a half tackles for loss. He also had 9 sacks to lead the defense. Both of those numbers were by far greater than anybody else. Interceptions, McDaniel and Leachman each had 3. Keenan Leachman had one of the best games you could ever have as a defensive guy against Southern. He did it all against Southern. He had 3 tackles on the night. He had a forced fumble, had a fumble recovery, had 2 interceptions, and he scored 2 touchdowns. So, just that number alone can make your defense look great. That's a guy who was a big time playmaker on his defense. McDaniel led the team in pass breakers with 5. Quarterback hurries. Bailey led the defense with 3. Forced fumbles. Ellis and Scott each had 2 fumble recoveries to lead the defense. Ellis had 2 forced fumbles. McDaniel had 3. Smith had a block kick, and Summerauer had a block kick. They did not record a safety as a defense. I'm looking at the special teams. Caleb Darbon, the Prairie View transfer at punter, he was 41 of 1,551 yards, 37.8 yard per punt average with a long of 64. He had 7 touchbacks, 7 kicks fair caught, 9 kicks inside the 20, and 750-plus kicks. They did have 2 punts blocked this season. As a team, they averaged 34.9 yards per punt. Noah Kiani was 13 of 18 on field goals on the season, 72%, 1 for 1 from inside 20 yards, 3 of 4 from 20 to 29 yards, 8 of 9 from 30 to 39 yards. He was 1 of 4 from 40 plus, had a long of 42, and he did have 1 kick blocked. Lorenzo Garcia had a 61-yard average on kickoffs. Kiani had 45 kicks for 2,455 yards, 54.5 yard average, had 4 touchbacks on the season. As a team, they had 4 touchbacks. The return game never really got a lot going. Their longest return of any kind was 43 yards on a kickoff return by Akeem McNair. McNair led the team with 7 kick returns for 129 yards, averaged 18.4 yards per return. Nico Duffy, 7 returns, 107 yards, averaged 15.2 yards per return. McNair had 5 punt returns for 13 yards, averaging 2.6 yards per return. The team averaged 2.4 yards per punt return with a long of 10 yards. As a team, they averaged 16.8 yards per kickoff return with a long of 43. When you look at their leading scorer, Noah Kiani had 66 points, 13 field goals, 27 to 28 on extra points, giving him 66 points. Jarvion Howard had 42 points. He had 7 touchdowns on the season. Griffin had 4 touchdowns, giving him 24 points. Hunt, 24 points on 4 touchdowns. Rogers, 18 points on 3 touchdowns. And then you had 4 guys with two touchdowns apiece, 12 points. So as you can see, Kiani led by a large margin. Howard led when it comes to touchdowns. Just looking at some of their season highs individually, Howard led the team with 18 rushes. He did that twice against Southern and Jackson State. He had 161 yards, which was a season high against McNeese. Macon had 75 yards as the longest run of the season. That came against Southern Miss. Aaron Allen had 46 pass attempts against Alabama State. He completed 32 passes against Alabama State, and he had a high of 370 yards against Bama State. He had 3 games where he threw 3 touchdowns apiece against Grambling, Southern, and Jackson State. His longest pass on the season was 55 yards. They had 5 games with 6 receptions to lead the team. Hunt did it against Prairie View. Griffin did it twice against Prairie View and Grambling. Hunt did it against Alabama State, and Howard against Texas Southern. 109 yards was the season high in receiving that came against Alabama State by Montario Hunt. Tavares Griffin had a 2-touchdown game against Grambling. Hunt had a 2-touchdown game against Jackson State. Hunt caught the 55-yard pass from Allen against Jackson State. Kiani made 3 field goals in 2 games, 1 against Southern and 1 against Alabama State, including the game winner against Bama State. And the longest field goal on the season was 42 yards against McNeese. They punted 8 times by Kenny Lee Pham against Texas Southern. Kiani had a 51-yard average on punts against McNeese. Darbon had a 64-yard punt against Grambling. The longest punt return was against Pine Bluff by Akeem McNair for 10 yards. McNair had the longest kickoff return against Southern Miss for 43 yards. Ellis had 15 tackles to lead the defense. Bailey, 2.5 sacks against Southern. Those 15 tackles by Ellis were against Prairie View. 4.5 tackles for loss for Bailey that came against Southern. And Leachman had 2 interceptions against Southern. Looking at some of the team highs, they ran the ball 50 times against McNeese. They ran the ball for 309 yards against Pine Bluff. They ran 3 touchdowns against Valley. They had 46 pass attempts against Bama State, 32 completions against Bama State, 370 yards against Bama State, and 3 touchdowns against Grambling. So as you can see, this offense was really explosive in the pass game. The running game never really got where it was, but this still was a great season. I know, you want to make the championship game, and coming up, 1 game short always hurts. But this was a nice turnaround for Alcorn, coming off of a couple disappointing seasons. Just couldn't get over the hump at the end. But that's still, a pretty solid effort for the Braves, and we'll see how they do in 2024. So, with that being said, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. C Wells coming at you, and you can hit the square on the screen that'll have the link to the Alcorn 2023 season preview, and you can also hit the subscribe button from there. And that's gonna do it for me, man. I'm gonna holler at y'all on the rebound. Y'all take it easy. Peace.